Rightio, today we're going to be chatting about the Li-Ning Red Hare 8 Pro, which I would say is one of the more requested, more recognisable Chinese shoes that I've come across. A lot of people are seeing this on AliExpress or Temu or Taobao. They want to know whether it's worth picking up at a suspiciously good price point. So I want to chat through things today, give you my full thoughts, a few Western comparisons as well, just to help you understand exactly what this shoe is about and whether it is worth picking up for that suspiciously good price point. In terms of some specs here to start things off, we've got 35mm of foam here in the heel, 8mm drop down to 27 in the forefoot. This is definitely one of the more kind of nimble, flexible daily trainers that I've come across. Think Velocity Nitro 4, Peg Plus, Mark 6, in around that kind of zone where you can pick up the pace, but you are going to feel the ground just that little bit more. They are using a super foam midsole, which is their Boom Tech, a beaded PEBA compound, which I think feels a bit more juicy, a bit more energetic than what you might expect from something like Power Run PB from Saucony. Just does have a little bit more sink in, a little bit more fun factor to it. They have added some plastic elements as well. A little bit of a midfoot shank there just to add a bit of extra torsional rigidity. And then they do have this strategic plastic clip, which runs from the arch of the shoe around the back of the heel counter into this kind of lateral winglet, which reinforces the heel counter there. Overall, with a bit of extra plastic elements and quite a healthy outsole as well, we're coming in at 248 grams, which I think is pretty decent, coming in around the weight of an Evo SL, maybe 5 grams more, which I think is pretty decent these days. In terms of the upper, I think the headliner here is that we do have a pretty snug torpedo-shaped fit, long and skinny, doesn't really open up into the forefoot much at all. Quite similar, I would say, in feel to the Hoka Mark 6, if you've ever worn that shoe. Doesn't really open up, doesn't really stretch either. The TPE mesh is very flexible and very breathable, but it doesn't really give or really open up much at all. So this is not one that you can trust in a break-in period. You do have to get the right fit out of the box. I would suggest wide footers steer clear of this shoe altogether. Standard feet, narrow feet, I think you can get away with it, but you should go for your standard Western size. True to size here, I would say, is the way to go. I've gone 10.5, which I wear with Hoka, Nike, Saucony, Asics, all the rest of them, whereas in other Chinese brands, I've been kind of tending to go for the size 10 compared to the 10.5, usually trusting in a bit of room ahead of the toes. True to size, I think, would be my recommendation here. In terms of the rest of the upper though, it's pretty decent. I really like the extra bit of structure through the heel counter. I think a lot of people appreciate that in a more kind of nimble, flexible package. Oftentimes that is a bit of a sacrifice that you make. Pretty easy to find a lockdown back there. The tongue is very padded, but my one complaint is that it is quite a wide tongue, so it almost wraps entirely over the top of your foot, almost touching the insole either side, which is a little bit annoying because it does slip around, and I do think it makes the kind of lockdown at the top of the ankle collar a little bit tricky to find. You do have so much compression from the foam that you kind of have to adjust the way that you lace up because of that, and it is just that little bit weird and finicky. I think a gusset would do really well here. Trim up the tongue just a bit and we would have a really nice, snug, dialed in upper. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for everyone, but I think this style of shoe does deserve an upper in this kind of way. Maybe a bit of flexibility could help, but I do think overall it's doing a good job of keeping you locked down, keeping you kind of dialed in, which is, yeah, I think appropriate for this midsole. In terms of that midsole, I've been a massive fan of Boom Tech in a couple of different shoes now, but I do think this is the best application that I've felt. Without any carbon plates or aggressive geometries that I've felt in the Elite 4 and the Ultra 4, I do think that the foam has time to shine with a bit more compression and a bit more of a kind of fun, friendly, relaxed feel, which I think is more in its wheelhouse than kind of sharp, aggressive racing shoes. This foam is already pretty structured, it's already pretty stiff. I think adding carbon plates to it can sometimes feel like overkill, and so allowing it to kind of function on its own with a bit of help from a plastic shank and this heel clip, I think is a really nice use of this foam from Li-Ning. Definitely is a more traditional ride, you can see that. It's not super rocketed. It is pretty close to the ground. You do get a bit more ground feel, but I think that the way that the foam functions with a bit more of a kind of dense, gutsy feel does make this shoe plenty protected if you have a bit of leg strength behind you. This is not for the people who want that big, soft marshmallow of a shoe. If you like the Nova Blast 5 and the Rebel V5 and an SC trainer, and you just want to feel protected, cushioned, and have that deep, dense squish, this is probably not for you. But if you want something which is a bit snappier and has that nice kind of gutsy rebound, you can kind of feel the ground a little bit more, but it's not harsh. This is the kind of shoe which I think will be right up your street. People who like the Velocity Nitro 4, Mark 6, Peg Plus, I think we'll all enjoy shoes that feel like this one. I can recommend this as a really nice option to kind of build out your rotation and add a bit of extra variation in there. Work a few different extra muscles, which you might not be using in your kind of standard high stacked, kind of mushy daily trainer, if that makes sense. I do think that the stability here is decent, but not great. I think it's better than a lot of the other shoes in this category, like a Mark 6 or a Peg Plus or even a Velocity Nitro 4. I do think the plastic heel clip is a bit of an advantage over those other shoes, but it isn't still the most stable out there. It is still fairly flexible. It is still quite a narrow platform. So I'm not going to be recommending this as a stability shoe. I would only say that it is a little bit more structured and a little bit more directed than other styles in this category. So if you want to be part of the action and you want to kind of enjoy this style of shoe, this could be your entry into this category without it feeling too kind of unstructured and too harsh underfoot. In terms of the actual runs which I think suit this shoe and the way that I've been using it the most, this has definitely turned into my kind of fun everyday up-tempo trainer. It's not the shoe that I'm putting on after a hard session or a big gym workout. It doesn't quite have the protection to kind of get me going there. But if I'm feeling reasonably fresh, up and about, I've got a bit of pop in the legs, this is the perfect kind of shoe that I can chuck on for 40 minutes to an hour and feel plenty protected, but I can kind of enjoy that more kind of flicky, snappy kind of turnover, which I think is a lot of fun. I do think this is the kind of shoe which I enjoy in my training as that kind of diversity pick. You want something which is kind of build a bit of elasticity, get you working a little bit harder. I think a lot of people enjoy this style of shoe. For me, it's been a big hit this year. I love the Velocity Nitro 4. Peg Plus was huge for me last year. This is slotting right into that category with maybe a bit of extra guts to it. I think some of those shoes can feel a little bit flat sometimes, like they do bottom out even with some pretty nice foams. I think the beaded foam here is a really nice pick, and I have enjoyed this as much as those other shoes, if not sometimes a little bit more, especially if I'm not feeling quite as fresh. I do think it does have just that touch more protection to it. In terms of pace ranges, I do think that this is sitting more in my kind of up-tempo daily training. Can definitely push into tempo and threshold pretty happily, just on merit of being quite light, quite snappy, quite close to the ground. It's not my top pick for threshold stuff. I took it into one session and it felt fine. It could turn over well because it is just a bit more connected to the ground, but I don't think it's particularly assistive or kind of lends itself to running fast. It doesn't really beg me to go fast, but I do think it kind of wants to sit in that more up-tempo zone compared to like half marathon pace, for example. I really enjoyed this one. I think a lot of people will, but just make sure that you know exactly what you expect from this shoe. If you like soft ones, if you like big tall stacks and high rockers, this is not for you. Don't go buying this one. But if you know that you like flat, flexible, snappy shoes and you're kind of a bit bored of this max cushion trend, which I'm a little bit sick of, I think this is the kind of shoe that will get along with you really nicely. In terms of the outsole, we have full coverage GCR rubber, which is quite a soft, sticky compound on city footpaths, wet pavement, road. It's been great. I found the grip to be really nice so far. Taking it up to the farm though, on some gravel surfaces, hasn't been quite as flash. It doesn't really have any lugs to it, which kind of sit out afar from the kind of base layer of rubber. So this is definitely a road running shoe. So far, durability has been good. 60 Ks in, I'm seeing just a touch of wear down on this outside edge, which is to be expected for me, landing quite hard there. I think the durability is going to be quite good here, especially when you combine it with the Boom Tech, which is notoriously durable as a super foam. Beaded compound, a bit more resilient. I think the overall Ks you're going to get out of this shoe are quite good for a shoe of this style. Price-wise here in Australia, you can expect to pay about $110 off AliExpress, which is fantastic. About half the price of the Mark 6 Peg Plus Adios 9. Not quite as flash against the Velocity Nitro 4, but still a fair bit cheaper. I think for that, you're getting a really fantastic, light, snappy daily trainer with the quality of materials to match those Western brands. If you want to take that a step further, you could push that onto Taobao and pick it up for about $55 to $65, which is obviously even better. 4 pairs of this for one price of the Mark 6 is ridiculous. This is just another testament to buying Chinese shoes. Quality is there, performance is there. I think you'd be pretty insane to leave that on the table. I think this is the kind of model that I'd recommend people pick up as a kind of rotation builder, something to just chuck in for 1 or 2 runs a week to kind of flesh out the variation in your shoe rotation, give you something a little bit different, low risk. It's kind of a bit tough for some people who don't really enjoy a snappy option to then go out and spend another $260 on a whole new shoe, which they might not even like. So if you're kind of undecided about picking up this style of shoe, 55, 65 bucks, I think could be a really good pickup. Getting through a couple of quick comparisons to round things out, a lot of these feel quite similar in terms of a flat, snappy geometry with maybe a super foam. I want to chat more the kind of differences between the models. So firstly, Velocity Nitro 4, I think feels a little bit softer, a little bit more flexible, maybe a little bit more comfy, whereas this does feel a little bit more dense and protective and a bit more punchy through the foam. Maybe a bit more stable as well with this arch clip. I do think it controls your motion just a touch more, whereas the Velocity can feel a bit more squirrely. The upper of this one definitely does lock down a bit tighter than the Velocity as well. I think they're about the same shape, the same width, but the Velocity's mesh does have a bit more ability to kind of stretch and flex compared to this TPEE mesh. I would say if you want a bit more stability, I would lean the Red Hare 8 Pro. If you want a bit more of a kind of soft, flexible, fun feel, a little bit of a lighter weight, Velocity could be a good pickup as well, with the benefit of being able to try in store. Adios 9, it's quite a similar story, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more soft. It does feel a bit more grounded just on merit, I think, of being a touch lower in stack height. With that, it doesn't have that same stability element, which I mentioned just before. Again, I do think the Adios 9 has a bit more stretch to the light lock upper, a bit more kind of give to it, which I think will suit a few more people. But again, if you want a bit more kind of density to your ride and you want a bit more protection underfoot, I think the Red Hare 8 Pro will suit a little bit more. It's more of a kind of daily training focused shoe, whereas the Adios 9, I can imagine ripping a few more intervals in, just in terms of being a bit more grounded and a bit lighter underfoot. Got the Hoka Mark 6. I think the key differences there are the Mark 6 is more focused on the geometry, the kind of snappy roll through, whereas this is more reliant on the kind of compression and rebound that you get from the Boom Tech. Bit more dense, whereas the Mark 6 is a bit more kind of snappy, kind of flicks you off the front of the shoe. It is a bit more light and flexible. Same difference to the other shoes with a bit more stability through this arch clip, a bit more of a kind of built up feel, which I think some will prefer. I think Mark 6, again, a little bit faster, but this I feel a bit more comfortable in for my daily training runs. Very similar fit between the two. Both don't really stretch a whole lot. I think if you couldn't wear the Mark 6, you probably won't be able to wear this one, vice versa. Last one to mention is the Li-Ning Feidian Challenger 5, which is a bit of a different style of shoe, but I know people will ask. That one feels more like a kind of all-rounder super trainer. You can use it for your kind of intervals and sprints. It's got the stiffness, it's got the geometry with the carbon plate, but it can equally step back into long runs with a bit of a smoother compression from a top layer of unbeaded PEVA foam. This does feel a bit more dense and snappy and kind of short ranged, I would say. You can enjoy it for an hour, but if you push it up to an hour and a half, 2 hours, I do think it gets a little bit harsh underfoot. Just a different style of shoe. Both could exist in the same rotation where you might use this for your kind of everyday up-tempo daily training, maybe a tempo run, and then you might rely on the Challenger for your more serious speed runs or your long runs. They can kind of sit alongside each other without kind of interfering too much. Not quite the same category, I know people ask, but if you were going to go for one shoe, I'd probably say that most people will enjoy the Challenger a touch more, but there is kind of a place in your rotation for the Red Hare 8 Pro, which I don't think the Challenger can quite fill with a bit more stack and a bit more of a kind of fun super trainer vibe. Overall for me, the Li-Ning Red Hare 8 Pro has been a really nice inclusion in my rotation, definitely filling quite a specific spot. It's not a shoe that I would recommend to absolutely everybody. I do think you need to know what you're chasing if you're going to buy this one. You need to want that kind of snappy, nimble, more agile daily trainer, and I think you'll have a really good job. But if you're kind of the typical runner and you're just chasing soft squish, the kind of big marshmallow compression, this might not have you covered. But for a lot of people who are looking for specific shoes for specific jobs in their rotation, I think this is a really nice pickup. Maybe a bit snug in the upper. That's probably the one improvement I would make, is just opening up the mesh a little bit more, making it a bit more stretchy. And I think that we would have a near perfect shoe in this category. Bit of an advantage with the stability elements. Nice punchy midsole for 55 to 65 bucks. I don't think you can go wrong. Really nice stuff from Li-Ning here. I think it's straight to the point, very effective in its specific category. If you know what you want, I think this is going to be a great success.